There's a quiet misunderstanding about getting older that most of us carry for years without noticing. We're told, directly or indirectly, that aging piles on weight, more worries, more limitations, more things to endure. That life somehow tightens its grip as time goes on. But that isn't what actually happens, not in the ways that matter most. What often surprises people, sometimes only in their 70s, sometimes much later, is that aging doesn't always add pressure. Very often it removes it slowly, almost shyly, like fog lifting without asking for attention. The truth that contradicts what we're taught is this: much of what exhausts us in life is optional, but we don't realize that until we've lived long enough to feel the cost of carrying it. When you're younger, pressure disguises itself as purpose. Expectations feel like direction, the need to prove something feels like fuel, and you don't question it because everyone around you is walking the same fast road, breathing the same heavy air. It feels normal. Then one day, usually without drama, something shifts. You wake up and realize you no longer feel the same urgency to explain yourself, or to chase approval, or to win arguments that never truly mattered. And the surprising part isn't the loss of these things, it's the relief. Ah, so that's how it really is. You begin to see that much of life's noise was never life at all. It was tension, comparison, fear wearing respectable clothing. And with age, not suddenly, not all at once, you gain something precious: perspective that no book can give, no advice can shortcut. It's not that life becomes easy. Pain still visits, loss still leaves its mark. But the pressure to perform, to impress, to be endlessly something for everyone else, that pressure starts to loosen. And in its place, something quieter appears: space. Space to breathe without apology. Space to feel without rushing to fix it. Space to be human, not impressive. This isn't a story about decline, it's a story about release, about how certain weights fall away when you stop believing you're meant to carry them forever. And once you notice that some pressures disappear with age, a deeper question begins to form, one that changes how you look at the rest of your life. Tapos time. For most of our lives, we misunderstand what happiness is supposed to look like. We imagine it as something built, piece by piece, through effort, success, and endurance. We're taught that if we just hold on long enough, push a little harder, stay a little stronger, peace will eventually arrive and sit beside us. But peace doesn't arrive that way. What age slowly reveals, sometimes through exhaustion, sometimes through loss, is that happiness was never hiding in what we accumulated. It was buried beneath what we refused to release. When we are younger, holding on feels responsible. We hold on to roles because they define us. We hold on to grudges because they protect us. We hold on to expectations because letting go feels like failure. And no one tells us that the weight of holding on grows heavier every year, even when the objects themselves don't change. Aging has a quiet way of correcting this misunderstanding, not through lectures, through lived experience, through the simple realization that the body tires faster than the ego learns. And when the body begins to ask for mercy, the mind finally listens. Letting go, then, is not giving up. It is not indifference. It is clarity. It is seeing that many of the pressures we defended so fiercely were never essential to who we are. They were habits of fear, inherited expectations, or stories we told ourselves to feel safe in an uncertain world. The difference between holding on and letting go is not strength versus weakness. It's tension versus freedom. Holding on keeps the muscles tight, the mind restless, the heart guarded. Letting go creates room for softer mornings, for honest conversations, for silence that doesn't need to be filled. This shift in perception doesn't happen all at once. It arrives gently, like understanding something you've heard many times but only now truly feel. You begin to notice that the people who seem most at peace are not those who have mastered life, but those who have stopped fighting it. And as this awareness settles in, you start to recognize certain pressures that once felt unavoidable and now feel strangely unnecessary. Some fade without effort, others wait quietly for your permission. That is where our deeper reflection begins. Daojizyuzo. There is a tiredness that comes not from the body, but from a lifetime of trying to be enough. It settles into the shoulders quietly, almost politely. After decades of standing a little straighter than necessary, speaking a little louder than you felt, saying, Yes, when your inner voice whispered no. Most of us learn early that love and respect are conditional. Be useful, be successful, be agreeable, be strong. And so, we spend years, sometimes entire lives, performing versions of ourselves we believe will be accepted. We collect titles, responsibilities, and sacrifices like evidence, hoping that one day the verdict will finally be kind. You see it in familiar places, at family gatherings where you feel compelled to explain your choices, in conversations where you subtly highlight your past achievements, not out of pride, but out of fear of being dismissed, in the quiet anxiety of wondering whether you still matter now that you are no longer producing, fixing, or carrying what you once did. What age reveals, often with a gentle shock, is that worth does not disappear when usefulness fades. The pressure to prove yourself begins to loosen when you realize how little proof was ever required. The people who truly see you never needed credentials, and those who demanded constant evidence were never satisfied anyway. There is a moment, small but powerful, when you stop rehearsing your life in your head before speaking, when silence no longer feels like failure, when you allow yourself to simply be present without decoration. That moment feels unfamiliar at first, almost irresponsible. But then something shifts. You notice your breath deepen, your posture soften. You begin to listen, not to respond, not to impress, but to understand. And in that space, a quiet dignity emerges, not earned, not defended, simply there. Inner peace begins when self-worth no longer needs witnesses. The pressure to prove your value fades, not because life has diminished you, but because you finally see that you were never on trial. There was a time when being liked felt like a kind of safety. If people approved of you, you were protected. At least, that's what it felt like. So you learned to read rooms carefully, to adjust your tone, to soften your truths, to become just a little less yourself if it meant keeping the peace. This pressure rarely announced itself. It hid behind kindness, politeness, and good intentions. You told yourself you were being considerate, and often you were. But over the years, that consideration quietly turned into self-erasure. You became skilled at avoiding discomfort, especially other people's. You recognize it in familiar moments, laughing at remarks that sting, agreeing to plans that drain you, swallowing opinions because it's not worth the trouble. And each time, the cost felt small, almost invisible, until one day, you realize how long it's been since you spoke freely without checking the temperature of the room. Age has a way of loosening this knot, not through rebellion, but through honesty with yourself. You begin to notice that being liked by everyone requires a kind of constant performance, and performances are exhausting. More importantly, they are never reciprocal. The approval you chase is often shallow, temporary, and dependent on you remaining unchanged. There comes a quiet relief when you accept a simple truth. Not everyone is meant to understand you, and that's not a failure of character. It's a fact of being human. Different lives create different lenses, and no amount of explanation will align them all. As this understanding settles in, your words grow slower but truer. You stop offering pieces of yourself in exchange for comfort. You choose fewer conversations, but they feel warmer. You allow some silences to remain unfilled. Inner peace doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being real without apology. When the pressure to please loosens, something remarkable happens. You begin to feel lighter, not because others approve more, but because you finally do. Ostsivorit. Control feels reassuring when life is uncertain. It gives the impression that if you plan carefully enough, hold firmly enough, anticipate every turn, you can keep loss at a distance. Many of us spend years perfecting this skill, organizing, managing, fixing, anticipating, until it becomes second nature. You see it in everyday moments, the need to have answers ready, the discomfort when plans change, the quiet irritation when others don't do things the right way. Even in love, control can appear as protection, worrying in advance, advising when not asked, holding on tightly so nothing slips away. For a long time, this feels like responsibility, like maturity. But age brings a humbling clarity. You begin to see how little of life ever asked for your control in the first place. Bodies change despite discipline. People choose paths you never predicted. Events arrive without warning, indifferent to preparation. And slowly, sometimes painfully, you learn that control did not prevent loss. It only delayed acceptance. There is a particular exhaustion that comes from trying to hold the world steady with your hands. And one day, often after something finally breaks through your defenses, you feel it, the relief of letting your grip loosen. This doesn't mean you stop caring. In fact, care deepens. But it changes shape. You worry less about outcomes and more about presence. You listen more. You advise less. You allow uncertainty to exist without rushing to tame it. A shift in awareness occurs when you realize that control was never strength. It was fear wearing the mask of responsibility. Letting go of control feels risky at first, like stepping into open water. But soon, you notice you are still afloat, breathing, alive. Inner peace begins when you trust life enough to stop negotiating with it. And in that trust, you discover a quieter, steadier kind of freedom. Dostao. The world has a rhythm that grows louder every year. Faster news, new language, new rules for relevance. For a long time, you may have felt the need to keep pace, to understand every change, master every device, stay informed enough to avoid being left behind. At first, this pressure feels practical, reasonable. You tell yourself it's about staying connected, staying capable, staying with it. And for a while, it even brings a sense of pride. You're still sharp, still adapting, still in the conversation. But beneath that effort, there is often a quiet anxiety, the fear of becoming invisible, of being dismissed as outdated, of waking up one day and realizing the world no longer speaks your language. You notice it in small moments, the frustration with technology that changes without asking, the feeling of being overwhelmed by constant updates, the fatigue of opinions arriving faster than you can process them. And slowly, what once felt like curiosity begins to feel like obligation. Age offers a gentle permission slip here. You begin to see that not everything deserves your attention, that being informed is not the same as being consumed, and that wisdom does not require speed. There is relief in choosing depth over immediacy, in reading fewer headlines and listening more closely to the person in front of you, in accepting that some trends are not meant for you and never were. This isn't withdrawal, it's discernment. As the pressure to keep up fades, your inner world grows quieter. You stop measuring your relevance by how quickly you respond or how much you know. You start valuing what you understand deeply instead. Inner peace appears when you realize the world does not need your constant participation. It needs your presence when it truly matters. And in stepping back from the noise, you rediscover a rhythm that has always been your own. There is a certain identity many of us carry quietly for decades, the one who fixes things, the one others turn to in moments of trouble, the one who holds steady when emotions rise, who offers solutions when chaos appears. At first, this role feels meaningful, necessary, even loving. You become the steady hand in the family, the calm voice in a crisis, the one who knows how to make things work. And over time, this ability becomes expectation, from others and from yourself. You see it in familiar scenes. Someone shares a problem, and your mind immediately begins assembling answers. A loved one struggles, and you feel responsible for easing their pain. Even when nothing is asked of you, you carry a quiet sense of duty to intervene, to repair, to make things better. Age brings a subtle realization. Not everything that hurts is broken, and not everything broken is yours to mend. This understanding often arrives through disappointment. You offer advice that goes unheard. You give help that's resented. You pour energy into situations that remain unchanged. And eventually, you begin to question whether fixing has truly been helping or simply exhausting you. The shift happens when you allow others the dignity of their own struggles, when you listen without rushing to solve, when you accept that growth often requires discomfort and love does not always mean rescue. Letting go of this pressure feels unfamiliar at first, almost like neglect. But soon, something softer replaces it, presence without burden, care without control, compassion without depletion. Inner peace grows when you stop taking responsibility for outcomes you never owned. You remain kind, you remain available, but you are no longer carrying the weight of the entire room. And in that release, you find yourself resting more often, not from love, but within it. When you step back and look at what has fallen away, something becomes clear. Life did not become smaller by releasing these pressures. It became more spacious, no longer proving your worth, no longer auditioning for approval. No longer gripping for control, no longer racing the world, no longer carrying every problem as your own. What remains after these releases is not emptiness. It is essence. There is a particular kind of simplicity that only comes after a long life of complexity. Not the simplicity of ignorance, but the simplicity of understanding what no longer deserves your energy. You begin to see that peace was never waiting at the end of effort. It was waiting beneath it. Life, when stripped of unnecessary weight, reveals its quieter truths. Mornings become enough. Conversations deepen. Silence feels less like absence and more like companionship. You stop asking, "What else should I be doing?" and begin noticing, "This is already here." This is the quiet climax most people never name. Not a dramatic victory, not a final answer, but a soft recognition that subtraction has been your greatest teacher. Each pressure you released returned something more valuable in its place: breath, presence, honesty, rest. You understand now that freedom is not found in having unlimited choices, but in needing fewer of them. That fulfillment does not come from adding meaning to every moment, but from allowing moments to be meaningful on their own. In this stillness, life feels less like a task and more like a conversation, one you no longer need to dominate or solve. You listen more than you speak. You accept more than you resist. And in doing so, you align with a rhythm that feels ancient and forgiving. This is not the end of striving, it is the end of unnecessary striving. And standing here, in this quieter place, a final layer of reflection begins to surface. As life grows quieter, the questions change. They no longer rush you forward. They sit beside you instead, patient and unafraid of silence. You may find yourself wondering when you first learned to carry so much, whose expectations became your own, which worries once felt urgent, and now feel distant, almost unfamiliar. Not with regret, but with a gentle curiosity, like looking through an old photograph and noticing how hard you were trying. What pressures have already loosened their grip on you, without you even noticing? Which ones are still resting on your shoulders simply because they always have? There is no need to answer quickly, or at all. Some questions are not meant to be resolved. They are meant to be lived with, like quiet companions during long walks or unhurried mornings. You might sense that peace for you doesn't look like happiness once did. It doesn't sparkle. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives softly, in moments that don't ask to be shared or explained. In the relief of not needing to be more than you are. In the comfort of letting some things remain unfinished. Perhaps the truest measure of a life well lived is not how much was achieved, but how much unnecessary weight was eventually set down. And as you sit with that thought, another question may rise, uninvited but sincere. What would it feel like to trust that who you are, right now, is already enough? If you feel inclined, you might recall a moment when letting go brought you unexpected peace, or a pressure you once believed was permanent, only to watch it fade with time. These memories don't ask for judgment, only acknowledgement. Life does not demand conclusions, it offers moments. And sometimes the most meaningful ones arrive when nothing more is required of you, except to be present and to notice what has quietly disappeared. And perhaps that noticing is its own kind of freedom.